Welcome to Franchise Empires, where aspiring entrepreneurs learn exactly what it takes to become a successful franchise owner, from one location to 10 and beyond. I'm the Wolf of Franchises.
Hey everyone, it's the Wolf. Today on the show we have Jonathan Neman, the co-founder and CEO of Sweetgreen. Yes, that is Sweetgreen, the salad chain that IPO'd for over $1 billion. And no, they are not a franchise. However, this was an opportunity I didn't want to turn down. It's not every day you have one of the fastest growing ever fast casual chain CEOs wanting to be on your podcast. And I thought, hey, they raised $200 million along the way. They founded this back in the mid-2000s after graduating from Georgetown University, and they've grown it from one location near Georgetown to obviously a nationally recognized salad brand. A lot of interesting stories on marketing and brand building from Jonathan in this conversation, as well as why they decided not to franchise and what the future of Sweetgreen holds, and particularly how they've leveraged technology and, as most recently, robotics within their concept. I think you're going to love this conversation.
The Wolf of Franchises is the CEO of Wolfpack Franchising, as well as a creator at Workweek Media. All opinions expressed by the Wolf and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Wolfpack Franchising or Workweek. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. The Wolf, Workweek, and Wolfpack Franchising may maintain positions in the franchises discussed on this podcast.
I mean, there's a lot of places I could start. I kind of just want to start at the beginning. I think it's interesting. I mean, you guys started Sweetgreen in college. You have two other co-founders. So before even getting to founding Sweetgreen, how'd you meet your co-founders? And just, were you guys generally entrepreneurial, or did this idea just come out of nowhere? Let's start with just your relationship with Nathaniel and Nicholas.
Yeah, so I'll take you all the way back. So I grew up here in Los Angeles, and I ended up at Georgetown I started school in 2003. In freshman year, I walk into my dorm room. First person I met right when I walked in, next door neighbor, was Nicholas Jamay. And, him and I really bonded throughout school, really over just a love of food. His family was in the restaurant business, so they were more fine dining. They had a number of they had a really nice restaurant in New York. It was called Le Caravel. It was kind of like a French institution, French fine dining institution. And I always loved food. I never thought I'd ever be a restaurateur or get in the restaurant business at all, but I just love to eat, and I love restaurants and loved food. And Nathaniel, I met a few days later. I met him in Accounting 101. He was also from LA, and two kids from LA at Georgetown really stuck out like sore thumbs. So you could immediately tell. I was wearing a Lakers shirt. He was wearing a Dodgers hat. I think we were both wearing Converse, and and immediately became friends. And I'd say all of us were entrepreneurial. I think that's actually what brought us together as friends. Is all of our parents were immigrants to the United States, and they were were entrepreneurs. So my parents came from Iran. Nick's parents came from France and Lebanon, and Nathaniel from Mexico and Taiwan from China. And so, mix of backgrounds, but all of our parents were, small business entrepreneurs in their own right, all did very different things. But I think we always saw that as the example. When we were at school at Georgetown, the track was always to go into banking or consulting.
Yep.
Or, you're going to get a job. That was never really what we looked forward to. For us, it was always about going and starting something. I just didn't think it was going to be a restaurant. And it was, we all went through college. We were friends. I don't even say we were best friends, but we were good friends that respected each other, kind of saw that entrepreneurial nature in each other. And then it was really senior year. I had just gotten back from being abroad. I was in Australia. Nate had spent some time in Madrid, and we all got back, and I had seen a lot in Australia around this way of living and eating food, which if you've been there, if you go to the Aussie cafes, which have now kind of come to the US, you see there's this culture around this cafe culture of it's a delicious, healthy food, but it was also cool, and there was a vibe to it. There was a lifestyle to it, unlike I think what healthy food in the US was. And it kind of sparked, this light bulb, like, why does that not exist in the US? Why can't there be a place to eat that is healthy, that is still really delicious and convenient and affordable and cool, quite honestly, and make a, really cool and fun brand around it. And so it started off as let's just do this as for fun. Let's open one restaurant. It was the beginning of senior year. We decided we were going to open one restaurant and see what happens. And we had no idea what we were doing at all. We took over a 500 square foot space. We thought it would take us a couple months. We thought we'd open it by like the spring of that year. And of course, everything was harder, took much longer. But at the same time, as we kind of dug in, we were like, whoa, this isn't an idea for one restaurant. This is an idea maybe for a national and one day global chain.
Yeah. Okay. So that was going to be one of my questions, was from the get-go, like, did you envision this multi-unit growth path? And it sounds like that was kind of baked into the DNA, the concept from day one.
Yeah, kind of. I think when we originally started, it was, let's open one because it would just crush it here in our community. But as soon as we started writing the business plan, we realized that the opportunity was so much bigger than that. 2000, it was, when we were starting to write the business plan, it was like 2006, and we opened the first store 2007. So Chipotle had just gone public. You kind of seen this fast casual revolution taking place. You saw consumers looking to be healthier. You had movies like, Super Size Me had come out, and it was just like the beginning of that. Michael Pollan's book had come out. Like all of these like conversations around how people thought about food were starting to take shape. And we kind of felt like, in a lot of ways, we're very lucky with our age. I'm I guess an elder millennial, and we kind of saw our generation rejecting the fast food of, maybe the prior generations. And we just kind of saw an opportunity, a niche in the market where we could create a fast food company that was also good for you and really build like this lifestyle brand and this mission-driven brand around the whole thing.
Amazing. That's super interesting timing too with, I guess, Chipotle going public. So maybe there was somewhat of a playbook kind of in place. But so when you guys actually founded it, when like the first location, from what I found online, was November 2006. So were you guys graduated at that point and this was like the full-time gig, or were you still in school?
Yeah, so we started writing the business plan fall of 2006. By the time we opened, we actually opened August 1st, 2007. So we graduated in like May, and we thought we'd open in April. Of course, we were like every restaurant that's usually opens. We were late and over budget, but we got open. It was a very weird time right after graduation because, first of all, during graduation, I'll never forget, like, in cap and gown, running from graduation to a construction site. Fully, like, our mind was totally focused on Sweetgreen. And then everybody leaves, like all your classmates, everybody leaves DC, and we just stayed. We were there all summer, like building this restaurant. And at that point, I had actually accepted a job a year earlier to go work for a consulting firm. I went to go work for a company called Bain & Company.
Yep.
And so we opened in August. I kept delaying this job. I was very focused on Sweetgreen. Finally, in November, I show up because the job was in Boston. I show up. I showed up. The reality was the restaurant was so small, couldn't afford to support the three of us. Could barely fit the three of us in it. So I went to Boston, worked at Bain. I was there for less than a year. I was there for almost a year. Learned a lot, met a lot of great people, but realized that entrepreneurial life was what I loved. And like, even when I was at Bain, I was in the bathroom half the time on phone calls. I probably wasn't the best Bain employee, just because I was really focused on what I kind of felt was my life's mission. Yeah. And as soon as we decided to open restaurant number 2 and 3, I left the job and moved back to DC. Okay.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I guess was one of the co-founders like in the Sweetgreen all day. And like even just that early stage.
Yeah, both. Yeah, for us, I mean, for the first few months, the three of us were running the place. We didn't have a manager. It was just like, that was what we did. We ran the restaurant. We did everything. Even when I came back, a year later, we were still running the restaurant. The first 3 restaurants we ran pretty much totally ourselves. We had
Okay.
no corporate infrastructure at all until we got to like restaurant, maybe 5 or 6. And so it was very, very hands-on, which I think was good. You know, we had to learn every part of the business. We had to do it ourselves. And I think it really like helped shape our one, in having never worked in the, restaurants and the business, I think coming at it with a first principles approach, this like naivete was very helpful, but also we had to get our hands dirty to really understand the business in order to continue to shape it for the future.
100%. No, it's a constant theme, whether it's a franchisee or anyone on the podcast, that if they started out kind of just, working on the front line, so to speak, that, they just are able to learn everything about the business. And I've never heard a negative scenario where that like didn't help them.
By the way, even today, I mean, listen, it's so hard it's so easy to get stuck in, the ivory tower, be in the corporate office and, be behind a screen. But, I remind my team, I have to remind myself that all the answers are in the restaurants. We require all of our corporate employees to work at least 4 days a year in the restaurants. I look to spend about, at least 25 to a third of my time in restaurants. And
Yep.
It's where, as much as you can learn from a PowerPoint, a deck or, looking at the numbers or, having meetings at the end of the day, like that's where it all shows up in the consumer experience and the team member experience. And so it's just so important.
100%. No, I couldn't agree more. And, in those early days, for instance, I tweeted about this beforehand, just like to ask the audience, what they'd want to learn. And a colleague of mine actually mentioned that she went, or I think she definitely lives in the DC area. I can't remember where she went to school. But anyway, she was asking about Sweet Life Festival. So what was that? I looked it up. It was like a proper music festival with like legitimate headliners from Avicii, Kid Cudi, Lana Del Rey, Calvin Harris. Yeah. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I got some posters right above me.
Yeah, I saw that too. That's perfect. Yeah.
So you can see these in my office. So, we started the company, we started the first restaurant in 2007, again, not knowing much about, the traditional restaurant business or how to market. And, we opened our second and, we opened restaurant number 2 and 3 in 2009. When it got to restaurant number 3 actually did really well. Restaurant 2 and 3 opened at the same time, also in DC. Restaurant 2, it was in DuPont Circle in DC, and it just wasn't doing well. It opened up and it was doing fraction of what we expected the pro forma to be. And you realize that it was just the fact that we couldn't get trial. We couldn't get breakthrough to get people to try it. In Georgetown, it was easy because we were students. It was such a captive population. But it was hard for us to break through the noise. And for us, it was just bringing something the other thing that we loved outside of food was music. And we thought that music was this universal language, cool way to build community, just, essentially throwing a party, right? Is a great way to bring people together and bring community. You have to remember we were 22 or 23 years old. So we're all right, we're going to go. So we opened the second restaurant, was struggling that summer. One morning, Saturday morning, we decided to just go to Guitar Center. We buy a giant speaker. We post up in front of the restaurant and we just start DJing on the street, just playing music. And it, our friends came, everyone's hanging out. People are, it started to create a little bit of a community vibe and not just be a fast food restaurant. And then you had these light bulbs go off all right, the answer to the business is really building community. And what better way to build community than bringing food and music together? And so that DJ set turned into a little block party, and that second restaurant was right. It was right where the DuPont Farmers Market was. It's kind of like the big farmers market in the area. And so we did this thing where every Sunday after the farmers market, we would host these block parties where we would just bring local bands and DJs and artists and just bring the community together. It was a free event, and people would just hang out in a parking lot and play music and get to try the food. And we bring a bunch of our farmers in. And this thing kept on growing and growing to the point where all right, maybe we're on to something here. And we decided to throw a festival. The first festival was in that parking lot. It was free. It was a bunch, the headlining act was Hot Chip, but we couldn't get Hot Chip to play, so we could just get them to DJ because they were playing a show that night. And it did well. It did, again, it like started to give the brand a different positioning. It was this way of like taking from the original thought, which was we want to make healthy eating cool. Not usually in America, when you thought about healthy eating, it was like eat your vegetables. It's kind of granola. And we didn't think it had to be that way. There was a way to make it fun and show that it can still be delicious and cool. And that was the whole idea. And so the next year, we're like, all right, let's throw a real festival. The first one was like 1,000 people. We're like, let's throw a real festival, like 3,000 to 5,000 people. We start looking at venues. We realize that the festival business is really a fixed cost business, as in you have to build all this infrastructure, whether you have 1,000 people or 100,000 people, you still have to build a stage, bathrooms, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And talent costs are fixed. Like you pay an artist once, and if you're going to amortize it over 1,000 tickets or 100,000 tickets, it's kind of the same cost. And so we met this guy who owns all the like big music venues in DC. His name's Seth. He owns like the 930 Club and Merriweather, and he also produces shows. And he's like, listen, this might sound crazy, but why don't we just, maybe we can do it at Merriweather Post Pavilion. And Merriweather Post Pavilion is like the amphitheater in DC. And we were like, all right, we did the math. We're like, actually, for the cost of building all the infrastructure, it's probably less risky to go do it at your amphitheater, but the amphitheater is a 20,000+ person amphitheater.
Oh,
and
damn.
So we started talking about it. We started reaching out to bands, and I think we got really lucky that first year. We got the Strokes to agree to headline. Once the Strokes said yes, like everybody else said yes. And then we were off to the races. We sold almost 20,000 tickets that year. We ended up running the festival for about 7 years, grew to 2 days and over 25,000 people per day, and some awesome acts. And like Kendrick Lamar, Calvin Harris, The Weeknd, Lana Del Rey, Phoenix. It was super fun, and it was our way of showing you could. We used to joke like, this day that's usually the most unhealthy day of the year, usually really bad for the environment. Can we create a place where you can go eat a bowl of quinoa while listening to Kendrick Lamar? And like, we loved like the tension of that almost like it like shouldn't make sense. Usually you go and you like eat a bunch of crap and you have this like fun day. It's like, can you do it and eat good, delicious food and have this, this fun, awesome festival?
It's fascinating. And even just I can't even imagine what it was like. Just, you still have 3 restaurants to run for that first one. And then you're also throwing a music festival. So, and like to sell 20,000 tickets, that's not by no means an easy feat. So like, I'm sure you tapped into the Georgetown market, like college students, obviously, like who doesn't like a festival? But yeah, what was it, just digital marketing and was there, so I'm curious, how did you sell
we only had...
Yeah. Sorry, no, go ahead.
Yeah, you have to remember we had like 5 restaurants, like when we at that point. And so like you're like a tiny little restaurant company with now a festival that huge names kind of started to get some national attention. And we sold tickets, through our channels. So like we used our social media, we advertised it in our restaurants. We used all of our digital properties, and then we partnered with the promoter to sell the tickets. But it was really like, we realized it was really talent driven. That was like one of the things we learned. Also, what made the festival business hard in later years is as talent got more and more expensive, it was like you lived and died by your headliner. And what made us go from 1,000-person festival to a 25,000 person festival actually is what started to make the festival really challenging.
Yep.
Because then the when we started in 2011, we were the only festival in the area. Fast forward 4 or 5 years, and there was hundreds of festivals around the country, and they were now like 80 to 100,000 person festivals. And so when you have 80 to 100,000 people, you can pay the Rolling Stones, and you can pay Jay-Z, and you can pay these like really large artists, and that's really what drove it. But that was also one of the, to your point, what was really challenging is we were running a restaurant company and a festival company at the same time, all with like the resources of a tiny restaurant company. So for a few months a year, we would almost like the whole team, including our store managers, everybody would like help out in like building and running this event. So it was really fun, but it was also very stressful.
Yeah, I would imagine. That's honestly, I mean, it's just cool that you pulled it off, and like you have the festival posters behind you. So I'm sure plenty of good memories, at least. I'm curious, did you see
great memories? And I think it did a lot for the brand.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Were you able to see a noticeable bump in customers or foot traffic, or just some type of brand awareness metric?
We were way less sophisticated back then.
Okay.
So we tried so hard to like justify it with like measuring comp store sales and customer acquisition. And I remember at one point, like email matching purchasers of the tickets to, who came, purchasers at the festival, and then our customers. And at the end, I think what we learned is it was a really interesting lesson in brand building. Is brand building happens over time.
Yeah.
And brand positioning is something, I think we'll never be able to truly quantify what that did for us, but it totally opened so many doors. It positioned us in a completely different way, and not just another salad fast, there's hundreds of salad or healthy fast food chains out there. And this positioned us in a different way, connected to community and lifestyle in a different way. So to answer your question, like, very hard to point to any like direct financial impact, but over time, I think it gave us a lot of license as a brand, that this idea of the sweet life, that Sweetgreen wasn't just, a restaurant concept, but a lifestyle and a movement and a philosophy around it. I think brought that idea to life. And I think it taught us a lot about how you build a brand over time and how you build community over time.
Yeah, it's fascinating, honestly. Just I doubt there's many restaurant brands that have ever done that. Launch a music festival for a few years, so I had to touch on it. But
yeah, we hope to bring it back one day.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I'll attend the next one for sure. Moving towards, I guess, so you guys had 5 restaurants. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the first major investment you guys took on was around 2013, about a $22 million round. Leading up to that, I guess I'm curious, how many locations did you have open? And did you explore alternative ways of expansion? Like, was franchising ever on the table, or is it always going to be the venture capital route?
Yeah. So good question. So we talked a lot about franchising from the very beginning. I mean, obviously, as a restaurant concept, it's a huge question, especially considering most restaurants in the U.S. are franchised.
Yep.
For us, I think what the reasons we decided not to. There's a few reasons. One, the unit economics of our restaurants were really strong. So the cash on cash returns of the restaurants that we were building were really, really strong. 2, I think from the beginning, we set out to say we wanted to build this like once in a generation breakthrough brand. And in order to do it, we really thought that we had to control the experience. We really we always kind of like said, like, we want to play this at, build a, 100+ year brand.
Yeah.
And we were always scared that franchising brought too much risk, especially given the high complexity of our restaurants, from our supply chain to our fresh prep kitchens. Like, we were like scared to hand the keys to someone else because we were afraid that we would tarnish the brand and experience, because it's not as cookie cutter of an experience as a lot of the other franchises, where it's just much easier to operate. It's not a commissary model. We make our food from scratch. And so we were really nervous about that. And then the third reason was we saw so much disruption coming to the restaurant industry. I think we saw early signs of how technology was going to shift the whole industry. And I think with that, we were really nervous of like having a company that, would have to convince our franchisees around investing and evolving. And we really wanted to kind of have that full control. So we really looked, the companies we looked at, or like in the restaurant space, it was like we thought Chipotle and Starbucks were kind of best in class. and we wanted to create those. And I think the last is, I think while it was very hard to raise money for the first, 5 or 6 years, we were really bootstrapping and kind of stringing along capital, a couple of restaurants at a time. We had enough access to capital and we generated enough cash flow to keep going. And then I think we got really lucky. And I say this is like, I think it would be very hard to do what we did in another time period. To be specific, Sweetgreen, a lot of it was built in a zero interest rate era, or generally a very low interest rate area where there was a lot of flow of capital. And I think that's what allowed us to build the infrastructure and build this footprint. And if you think about like the past 50 years, how many restaurants have been able to hit, call it like terminal velocity in a corporate owned format? It's just so few. You can count them on like one hand, right? It really was like Starbucks and Chipotle have like done it in a massive way. But I think and both had, Chipotle kind of had the help of McDonald's in doing it. I think we were lucky that with the capital was flowing, and we were able to attract it in a way that we could maintain control and keep it all company owned.
It's really interesting because initially I have heard, there's other people who kind of say that where, meaning they don't want to franchise because they're worried about quote unquote giving up control, which my typical pushback is, hey, someone with skin in the game is actually going to care more about the restaurant or whatever the franchise concept is than potentially, a salaried manager who isn't an owner or operator. However, part of my kind of, the aspects of that are implied in my head are always, it's a franchisable concept. Which it sounds like you're saying that there is, more on the supply chain, and the fact that it's not a commissary model, that's definitely different than a lot of the restaurant franchises I've spoken to. So, I guess assuming that it's not something that is necessarily easily trained, or not something where you can transfer the knowledge in, say, a 2-week training and then some remote phone calls. Perhaps, it isn't something that would have maybe succeeded as a franchise.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think part of it was the premium positioning of the brand. I think it's like both the price point, the experience, the consumer base. We kind of play in this, slightly elevated fast casual world where I think the consumers also expected a level of service that I think it would have been harder to control. I do think, to your point, there is a lot of like having an owner with skin in the game. There's a lot of value in terms of how they will run their restaurant, and in some cases maybe run it better. I do think there's ways to do that and to incentivize your managers and how we build the organization to still create that right incentive structure and make have that ownership feeling within their restaurants. But yeah, I think there's definitely advantages of franchising in terms of first to market. And that's the one thing that, it's put a lot of pressure on the company in terms of having to be first to market and scale rapidly and doing it all yourself. It is definitely challenging, and it has forced us to raise, a ton of capital and build an infrastructure to support it. You also asked me about the first influx of the capital. We had, just to answer your question, we had 20 restaurants. We spent the first 6 years really focused on DC. It was, I think, I don't know about how intentional that was, but I think it was, in retrospect, it was really smart. I think it saved us, because I think if we had spread out early, we would have totally messed it up. But we cut our teeth in DC. We evolved the concept. We iterated a lot. It changed a lot, and we realized that like the restaurant business is really a local business. It's all about a market. It's all about your business in that region, in that market. And so by focusing in one area, we were able to both leverage our supply chain and our brand, but really build like an ecosystem in one city and learn the playbook that we could take other places. And so we did, the first 15 or so in DC, started to, do a couple in Philly. And then we had one location in Boston and one in New York. And it was the location number 20 was our New York location. And that's when Revolution came in with the first real investment. Up until then, it was, kind of bootstrapped, a lot of angel investors, and we were raising couple $1 million at a time. We'd raise like $2 million, open 3 restaurants, and the next year or a couple more, just like hand to mouth from a capital perspective.
Yeah. That's no, I mean it's scrappy. And I think something you said that founders and people who maybe are considering starting their own franchise would just want to consider is the fact that you were aware of maybe that technology was going to play a larger role within restaurants over the coming decade, and that investment in technology maybe shifts in the business model where maybe, hey, we're going to go heavy on, I don't know, either I'm just making up scenarios, but like creating our own app and we're going to accept customer orders from there, or going on DoorDash and Uber Eats and we're going to accept that they take X amount of that revenue, or whatever the situation is. The reality is with a franchise, if you want a system-wide change, even something what I'm sure for you would be quite simple, which is like, hey, let's get new signs with our new logo on the restaurant. If you have a franchise, that's a big conversation. That's $5,000 to $10,000 depending on the signs, and are they neon? Are they lighting up? Whatever. Like, that's a whole decision that you have to convince every single one to do. And there's going to be unhappy people basically, but you guys are probably just able to kind of, I don't know, I'm sure you have financial controls in place. It's a public company, but like theoretically, right? It's you can snap your fingers if it makes sense and you guys want the signs upgraded.
100%. And now imagine for a large investment, like something like the Infinite Kitchen, which is our automation product. Now try to convince a franchisee to invest in that, to put those in. And so again, we saw the value of control being so important here. And I think in the short term, we had so many opportunities, and I think it was really hard to say no, especially when we were capital constrained. Like, we had, thousands of franchise requests. You had big franchise, both international and here. Still like, and especially when you're sitting there being like, oh my God, I'm trying to open 2 restaurants. You have someone offer to open 1,000 for you and be in every city in America. I think it was very hard to say no to these things. But I think what kept us grounded was like the long-term vision always. Like, we wanted to build something that stood the test of time. And, we talked about like one of our core values, thinking sustainably. And we just never believed for our model. I don't believe this for all models. I think some franchises can work really well, but I think for our specific model and the vision that we had, it was important to maintain full control.
Yeah, no, it's, look, there's pros and cons to it. Obviously you guys have been able to, achieve significant scale. And then, you mentioned Starbucks, Chipotle, so it is possible. And there's definitely pros and cons to both sides. So I want to talk about kind of what you mentioned, the fully automated restaurants and the Infinite Kitchen. But before we get there, just regarding the fundraising. So, you guys raised, I think, around like total, it was hundreds of millions. I think maybe 365 is what I saw quoted. But regardless, it's less about the exact number, more just, what does it take to do that? Meaning, like, right, there's intense storytelling, and it's really not everyone can just raise that much money. You need to think so big and have the confidence to back it up. Did you guys get to a point where, or I'm trying to think of how to ask this, I guess. Yeah, was there ever just moments of doubt where you're like, guys, we're just a salad restaurant, but here you are, pitching this massive vision in the community and all these things. Just curious to learn about the learning moments, I guess, and anything from that, just that time period where you're really raising some big fundraising rounds.
Yeah, I think fundraising is really interesting because it's like the gauntlet that you have to go through as an entrepreneur. And it's kind of like this idea of writing a business plan, where the business plan itself, you throw it away, you kind of like, as soon as it's done, throw it away and you go run the business. But the act of doing it really clarifies the vision and your thinking. And I think kind of raising money is an extreme example of that, especially when you have a really hard time raising money. So, we opened the first one in 2007, but number 2 and 3 were 2008, 2009, middle of the financial crisis. And, it was really hard to raise money. We had very little track record. So what it really forced us to do is one, through that, those years and then even later years, really clarify our thinking. And so like the fundraising moments became these like milestone moments. That one, we had to make sure that we had achieved certain things in the business, proved certain critical milestones that would allow us to raise more money. But two, clarify the vision, the thinking, the strategy, so that we could, you had to sell that story so many times that you really had to believe it. In order to do that, you had to really clarify and like distill it down to really, who we are and what we want to be. So I think the fundraising actually in some ways made the company better strategically and set this North Star because we had to convince all these investors to give us money. We had to clarify it for ourselves and for our team. And I think that was really helpful. I do think in terms of, what allowed us to do it, I think one, we were in this category that was growing. And I think that's always important. We were in fast casual, which was the fastest growing part of the restaurant industry. And then we were in the healthy segment of fast casual, which was the fastest growing part of that. We were digitally enabled, which was, a huge part of our story. And I think people saw a lot of transformation, how that could be an accelerant to what we were doing. We were very people focused in terms of like bringing on a team and I think one of the things that we did is that the team helped us a lot because we've always knew what we knew and still do and know what we don't. This is my only real job I've ever had. And so, I wasn't, working at another restaurant company before. I'm now the CEO of, a public restaurant company with over 6,000 employees. And I think what allows me to do it is just knowing where I don't know the answer. And that means I have to just hire really great people around me and ask for help and ask for advice. And I think that was also a part of it as part of the fundraising. It's like, hey, we have this vision, but I'm not doing it myself. I'm going to bring on great operating partners and great technical partners and all these other people to fill in the gaps on the things that I don't know how to do. And I think it just not the last, most probably most important thing about fundraising is like unit economics in our business. There's two things for fundraising. It's what are your unit economics? What's like the cash on cash returns of your actual units, and what's the addressable market? Like how big can it be? And I think we were able to kind of tell the story, and we had the proof that your unit economics were awesome. They were replicatable, and we think we can have thousands. At the time we thought it was probably hundreds, and now we think it's probably thousands of these that we can have across the U.S. and hopefully one day across the globe.
Yeah. No, amazing. I definitely think that even if you're not fundraising, just writing out a business plan as if you were going to raise money could have such a value because it does bring you clarity and forces you to really think about, like what makes my business valuable, and maybe you'll find, oh wait, I should be doing X, Y, Z because right now I'm actually missing out on things. So very interesting to hear you kind of talk about that. And something you brought up earlier was the Infinite Kitchen, and you're fully. It's a newer. I think is there only one open today, but I guess
just one open.
Give us an idea of like paint a picture for the listeners here. What is it? And I have a lot of follow-up questions, of course, but we can start there.
Yeah, of course. So let me just take a step back. I talked about the complexity of our model. We're very high throughput operation. We run multiple channels, heavy customization. So, our orders on average have 10 to 12 items. 80% of them are customized. It's just like not only a lot of complexity in, obviously the fresh and local supply chain, the scratch cooking in terms of the prep, but then the assembly. And when we thought about, big picture, we thought about the restaurant industry, and something I used to always tell my team is, restaurants, there's businesses that as they get bigger, they get better. And then there's restaurants that as they get bigger, they get worse. And I'm talking about the actual experience.
Yeah.
And restaurants, for the most part, as they get bigger, it's like this death by 1,000 cuts where the actual experience gets worse. And in your case, you want to take McDonald's as like a case in point. We've all seen, you've seen the founder, how they used to use beef tallow and certain things around their food. And it's not that anymore. And the reason they've had to do that, they've had to engineer for scale. The engineering for scale in the previous world had meant, commissaries and process the food so you can simplify the node, the edge, the endpoint, make it as kind of dummy proof as possible and easy to execute, as well as increase the margins for the actual units. We found that very much counter to what we were all about, which is we were founded on this idea of fresh, really well-sourced, delicious food. And we were really worried that all right, at scale, are we going to have to give all that up in order to have the efficiencies to have a really great business? In other words, saying are we going to have to be just like everybody else and process our food in a center and send it out to the nodes just so they can run easier, because at scale, it's hard to manage these things. And we always kind of believed that there was a different way to approach this using technology. So step one was, how do we use software in the restaurants to actually enable us to maintain our scratch cooking? So we built these tools. One was called our cold prep, and then we have another hot prep, which is there's a lot of complexity in all these items that we're making from scratch every day. Instead of you kind of guessing how much to do, right? And there's the huge cognitive load of going through spreadsheets and deciding how much of what to make when. Can we make it super easy for you and just be have an app? It's like a GPS in the restaurant where it's all the answers are there. So it tells you exactly how much of what to make when. So you're making the right amount of food that stays fresh, both hot and cold, and in terms of your ordering. So the manager's job and the team member's job is just they have this GPS. So that was part one. We then saw that, the value in the Sweetgreen experience is how we source the food, that we make it from scratch in the restaurants, and then the combinations. The actual, if you think about, and there's the hospitality in the restaurant matters, the service experience, but we didn't see there's given that most of our revenue is happening on digital make lines where customers aren't even seeing it being made. So there's not as much of the value in the actual assembly. And so we always kind of thought that there was an opportunity to automate assembly. And so years ago, probably five or 6 years ago, we began trying to do it ourselves. We built an automation team, tried to do it ourselves, found it was very, very challenging to actually do. The engineering challenges were pretty significant.
Yeah.
And so then we met a team out of MIT that we'd been following. Founder was this guy Michael Farid and the Spice team, and they had built a concept called Spice Kitchen, which was essentially kind of Sweetgreen automated. And that was literally a huge part of their vision was, let's do what Sweetgreen did, but let's automate it. And it'll be a more replicatable model. And so they built this incredible automation product. They had opened 2 restaurants, and we stayed close with them. We just stayed in conversation. And then there was an opportunity about 2 years ago for us to join forces, and we acquired the company, and they joined Sweetgreen. And we then spent the next year and a half evolving that automation system to work at Sweetgreen. And so a couple months ago, we opened our first unit in Naperville in Chicago, and it's not a robotic arm. I think the way most people are approaching automation, it's a fully integrated dispensing system that has been custom made for Sweetgreen, and it means it focuses on maintaining the quality of food, perfect portioning, plating. It even spins, incredibly high throughput. And our goal with it was I think that when we set out to do it, it was, let's not create a technology that just improves our the financial model, which of course, that'd be great, but also creates a better customer experience. And I think what allowed us to do it is we were willing to think from first principles, not about how do we put this in an existing unit and try to replicate our existing flow. It was, with this technology, could we rethink the total restaurant experience from a first principles approach? And so we opened just a couple months ago. I'd encourage anyone to go check it out. There's a lot of videos online. We're very excited by it. So far results have been encouraging, but we're learning a ton. We're going to continue to test it, and we're going to do another pilot later this year before we commit to a broader rollout. But overall, I think it's going to be a huge improvement in the Sweetgreen experience, the actual experience. I think it'll improve our unit economics. It'll create a more scalable model. Over time, it'll allow us to even play with price in different ways to create more accessibility. And I do think it's something that you'll see much more in the industry.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to see what's happening, and I know that there's a lot of, there's some other restaurants that are seriously like experimenting with automation. I saw Crumble Cookies has like they're building a robotics division to test out ideas within their restaurant. So it's going to be really interesting if you could just like, I'd love to have a crystal ball and fast forward to see how it's all going to shake out and look like. But it's really cool that you guys are kind of really pushing and leading the charge there. I do want to ask, it sounds like, so did you guys build in-house proprietary software to help with that, to maintain quality at scale so that anyone working there, like you mentioned cognitive load, but I guess basically just makes it operationally a lot easier because you have some software that's telling them exactly what to make or prep food for a day at the restaurant? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, I think unfortunately when we started Sweetgreen, we kind of saw a digital transformation taking place in the industry, and we didn't, unfortunately, I think from like being pioneers and early movers, there wasn't a lot out there, a lot of software out there that does what we do. I mean, I'll be honest, even today, I wish there was a Shopify. I wish there was a one-stop shop solution. So anyone listening, like someone build that, because people ask me, like is Sweetgreen a restaurant, a food company, or a technology company? We are a food company. We are a brand and a food company, period, full stop. Everything else we do is an enabler to that. So technology, we did it because we had to do it. We saw a wedge and a way to accelerate our business. And like, do I think I needed to build an app? Like, did I want to build apps ourselves? Like build an ordering app? Absolutely not. I'd rather go to the Shopify, the Shopify solution and just pay a fee and do it. However, it didn't exist. And so I think we paid a lot of pioneer tax in order to do these things. I think the industry's changed a lot. Now, a lot of those things you can buy off the shelf. And I think what's great about that is it can allow restaurants to go back to doing what they're supposed to do, which is not build technology. It's to create awesome food and create great customer experiences. And at the end of the day, that's what I'd want. I want Sweetgreen to really be focused on. We will continue to do those things where we have to, right? Automation being an example. I couldn't buy it. And, if someone would rent it to me, it would have been nice, but no one was doing that. So we thought it was important to build it. To your answer, your question on those proprietary apps. Yeah, we do have those proprietary apps. And I do think we'll always do some proprietary, things around technology that are enablers to what we do. But at the end of the day, it all has to support our core value proposition, which is like Sweetgreen as a brand and a food company.
Amazing. Yeah, no, it is interesting to think because, you guys really were founded and started out well before, even that Uber wasn't even super popular, or maybe it wasn't even founded by the time. Yeah, so
Uber didn't even exist. We started. We started the same year the iPhone came out.
Holy crap! Okay, yeah. So you guys were pretty early. Wow. All right. Yeah. That's interesting. The pioneer tax, but yeah, I completely agree. I find I've been speaking with some brands and some of them have ideas to like build their in-house software, and the thought is it's going to make our business more valuable at the end of the day. But I completely agree with you. I mean, if you have something off the shelf that works really well for you, then use it, because there's a famous quote by Jeff Bezos on I don't know how he was comparing AWS to breweries in like Germany back in like the 1800s or something, like right when electric power started to come about. And I guess some breweries like were obsessed with building their own power sources, and those ones ended up failing because they stopped focusing on making good beer. And that's like the famous quote, is like just focus on making good beer. And obviously he's talking about just use AWS so that don't build out your own servers. It's not going to help your core business. But I'd imagine it's kind of nice today, right, though, to have like your own product suite that kind of works tailored specifically to your business. But still, I do agree, if there's like a Shopify-esque product out there for any business owner, just focus on the core competency.
Totally. And I think the world's changed. It's just different now in 2023 than it was. We introduced our app. We were kind of one of the first apps to market. It was 2010. So I remember it was like people thought we were crazy that we wanted to be able to do, an ordering app. It was just like, it was like a way out there concept of like, oh, you want to do mobile payment and cut the line with an app? Like now that's all just like, it's the cost of doing business. It's price of entry to have those things.
Yeah.
And for a small business, like you can just go to Toast or, one of the other, one of the other providers, and they could give give that to you out of the box. And so I think as you get larger, you may want to build some more custom products as you scale, but there really has to be a true ROI there. I don't think that the world of just having tech for tech's sake is over.
100%. Completely agree. Well, look, I know we're at time here. So it was a lot of fun to have you on, Jonathan. If there's anywhere online where people can follow along, obviously, I'm sure most of us know about Sweetgreen, so you can check out their website if you haven't shopped or eaten there yet. But personally, or do you have any social handles where people can follow along?
Yeah. For Sweetgreen, obviously, check us out at Sweetgreen, sweetgreen.com. Download our app, and then for me, I'm Johnny Nemo on Twitter, JONNYNEMO.
Sweet. All right. Well, we'll plug the Twitter account in the show notes, everyone, if you want to give them a follow, and I'll be tweeting about this for certain. Thanks again, Jonathan. Good to chat.
Awesome, man. I'm a huge fan. Thanks, dude.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Franchise Empires. We're coming to you soon with actionable insights to take the next step on your franchise journey. So make sure to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen.